Welcome to Inspire Campfire, a podcast where ordinary people tell their stories of extraordinary adventure. These are campfire stories meant to inspire the rest of us to light the fire within, get outside, follow our dreams, and return to tell our own stories. Ready? Let's strike the match.
Welcome to the show. I'm your host, Scott Wurtzbacher, and today we're going to talk about how travel and adventure can serve as a thread that weaves its way through a lifetime. For today's guest, adventure has been part of the fabric of his lifetime as a kid, as a dad, and now into retirement. Bob Delaney, known on the trail as John's dad, is with us today from Columbus, Ohio. In his early 60s, John's dad has recently completed a 300-mile, 30-day thru-hike of Kungsleden, the King's Trail in Sweden. It was a retirement gift he gave himself after a lifetime of work and parenting, and he's here to share his story and thread of adventure that runs through it. John's dad, welcome to the campfire.
Hi, thanks.
I am so excited. You and I had such a fun conversation a couple of days ago, and you have this story that just keeps on giving. There's so much. I don't know how we're going to pack it all into one episode here, but I want to start with Kungsleden because a lot of listeners may not be familiar with it. Can you tell us about this epic adventure that you took a couple of years ago?
Oh, for sure. The Kungsleden, or the King's Trail, is about 300-mile long, 420-kilometer trail in the very, very north of Sweden. I like to tell people that it's within walking distance of the North Pole, and that's off by several thousand miles, but the idea is the same. They started building it back in 1880, and the intent was just to have this trail through the mountains, and the people could hike, and that's what it is. They don't need to reroute it because there's no villages popping up. There's no utility work or pipelines going through. It's been the same place for a long time. It's pretty easy to follow because it hasn't moved. You can see the trail, but it also has blazes, orange or red blazes painted on rocks for the summer trail. There's also a winter trail, and those blazes are big red crosses at the top of huge poles because there's going to be 20 feet of snow there. And you don't really want to follow the winter trail in the summer because it goes over lakes and stuff and marshes.
Ah, okay.
In the summer, you stick to the summer trail. Along the King's Trail, or I call it Kungsleden, there are 4 mountain stations. And a mountain station is kind of like a lodge. It got a hotel kind of thing, not high class. They're old buildings, 50 to 100-year-old buildings. And they have a restaurant, a good restaurant. Oh, the food is so good, especially after eating Mountain House for a week. They have saunas, a laundry room, a store for resupply. And there was 4 of those kind of spread out about a week apart.
Okay.
They also have, 17 or so mountain cabins, different from the stations. Cabins are like bunkhouses in the middle of nowhere. They are supplied by helicopter and snowmobile. I mean, there is no road. I crossed in 300 miles, I think I crossed 5 roads. It is that remote. And the cabins have, one end is a bunk room. They have maybe multiple bunk buildings, but one end of the main building is a bunk room. The other half is a kitchen with propane stoves. No electricity, nothing like that. And the running water is about 100 yards away in a stream, and they got a really nice big pail, and you go bring in your water, and you can cook all your food. You can spend the night in the cabin or in the station for $50 US about, or you can camp anywhere you want along Kungsleden. They have allemansrätten, which it's every man's right. And Scandinavian countries have this in general. And it's basically leave no trace, camp anywhere you want. There's no concept of a no trespassing sign. You can camp wherever you want. Now, you can't camp on a guy's front yard. And you can't camp in the middle of his wheat field. But if there's woods and forest, you can camp there for one night. You can make a fire if it's safe. So it's just anywhere you want to go. There are 7 boat crossings. And most of them have a motorboat that you can rent. You can pay for a ride to go across. And one of them, you have to actually row a boat. One of the crossings is about 6 miles. So you can either row a boat or wait until the 2 or 4 o'clock boat time and pay maybe $40 US to get a ride 6 miles. And I saw people rowing that distance. So they do it.
A 6-mile row?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm gonna give away part of the podcast here because you wrote a book about your whole experience, which I read over the weekend in preparation for today. And one of the stories that I really enjoyed was like as you came to these river crossings, like I'm not sure the government entity that provides them, but you mentioned that they provide these rowboats.
Yep.
And could you just, because I think this is kind of a fun story, like there's a rule about like
Sure.
have to do when you find these rowboats.
At every crossing, and it is a government entity or the Swedish Tourist Association, which is also related to the government very closely. They put 3 rowboats at least. I saw 5 and 6 sometimes, but at least 3 rowboats at each crossing. And when you get there, you get in the boat and you row it across. Now, if there's one boat still where you came from, you're good. But if you took the last rowboat, you now need to tie on one of those other rowboats, drag it all the way back to where you started from and tie it up over there, and then row across. It is really bad form, and they frown on it quite a bit. If you take all the rowboats to one side, you'll strand the people. They have no way to get across.
It's kind of an honor system thing, but so essentially if you get to the shore there and there's only one boat, you've got to do 3 trips.
Or you pull out that extra day's supply of food that you always carry and set up your tent and wait for somebody to come the other way.
Oh, you could do that too. It just reminds me, there's like a riddle about like this family of 4 and how many times, like, how do you get everybody across with all these rules? It just reminded me of that. I was like,
Yep.
Imagining all these mental calculations, but I loved that story. It was very fun.
Oh yeah. So the trail itself, the tread of the trail is quite often hard packed dirt, quite often rocks, but they're rounded, smooth by erosion. They're not the jagged kind of rocks you might see on the Appalachian Trail in Pennsylvania. These are small, smooth, round big pebbles. There is a lot of water along Kungsleden. You don't really need to carry much. Like people carry 1 liter, or some people carry nothing. And they just, when they get thirsty, they just dip down and drink right out of the creek or the lake. The water is clear up there. You can do that. There are what I call mud pits that I didn't like too much once in a while because there is so much water. And you have to try to figure your way. How do I get around this little mud pit, which might be 6 inches deep or might be 2 feet deep? You don't know until you venture into it. And sometimes you can't get around. The whole area, it just has that much water. Routine we got into, I fell into a trail family with a woman from Germany, a guy from Austria, and a friend of mine, Bao, from Vietnam. And so the routine we got into is I'd get up early because I'm the slowest, and they were half my age. And I'd go as fast as I could, and they'd catch me at lunchtime. We'd have lunch together, and then we'd take off again. They'd find a great place for us to have dinner. And usually we stayed at dinner at a cabin because they got a picnic table. Half of every other cabin sells food in their little store, so you could resupply. We'd make dinner at the picnic table. And then what I really liked is we packed up and we walked for another 2 hours because we're there in the summer. We're above the Arctic Circle. The sun doesn't go down.
Ooh.
You don't have to worry about sunset. There's no need to take a flashlight because even at night, it wouldn't help you.
Yeah.
That was so cool. So we would set up, we'd get an extra 2 hours of hiking in after you had a nice meal. And then we just do that again the next day. And we'd catch up with each other at the water crossings, waiting for a boat, that kind of a thing. And we finished all the way up to Abisko National Forest. And I'll use some of these names that nobody knows, but if I said McAfee Knob and Katahdin and Springer, people would know what I'm talking about. The names I'll use they're just as famous, but only on Kungsleden. So we got the Abisko National Forest the last night. And there's a nice big area with a river right there and a view of a mountain. It was just a perfect way to end. And some women showed up from Latvia, set up their monster tent, pulled out a frying pan and a stove. These people were not, I found out they were not backpacking. They were car hopping or car driving up to Norway from Latvia. And we were only maybe 4 miles off a road. So they walked in with our huge tent. They had backpacks, but you would not be doing long distance. And so they had leftover food. And they asked me, I was leaving them alone, let them eat. And they asked me if I wanted to have their leftovers. Well, okay. I mean, it's food. I'm in the mountains. I'll eat food. But, I couldn't eat it out of my cup. I have my titanium mug because they had filled that with wine. They carried in some bottles of wine. We sat around. You couldn't have a fire, but where you would have a fire.
Yeah.
We sat around. A woman from France showed up and my whole family showed up. And we just sat around for 2-3 hours until we started getting cold. about 9:30, and we went to bed. It was just the perfect way to end the almost 4 weeks of hiking.
Yeah, it's amazing. Bob, for people that aren't familiar, and I wasn't before you and I first became acquainted, you're the first person that's ever talked to me about Kungsleden before. What are some of the like geographical highlights of that hike?
Well, you're above tree line most of the time, just in general.
Mhm.
About a third of the way south from the northern terminus at Abisko, they have Mount Kebnekaise, which is the highest point in all of Sweden at about 6,000 feet.
Okay.
And it's a friend of mine, as a new friend. I met him through YouTube, and he bought my book and stuff, and we've been exchanging emails. He just got back Thursday, and he did climb Kebnekaise. And it's real steep, and there's an ice glacier up there. Need an ice axe, and it's a challenge, but it's the thing to do. People go and do that. In terms of geographical things, there's the glaciers came through there, and they came through there. I'd like to say with a vengeance, but that's not maybe the right word. Everywhere you can see the impact of the glaciers coming through. Huge, beautiful, well, like valleys like this, just perfectly U-shaped valleys that you can just see, and you walk the whole day. You're walking the whole day through this valley, and there's a river. Other than Kebnekaise, the tall mountain, you're in the mountains and the glaciers, and there's rivers and waterfalls. I don't want to use the word awesome, because then we'll talk about the word awesome. It is the definition of awesome. It is so cool.
Wow, I love it. So I guess for me, this was sort of almost a retirement gift that you gave yourself. And it's kind of a part of your overall story here, but I'm curious, like, why you chose this particular hike. Like, what was it about Kungsleden? If I recall, this is the first time you've done a thru hike of this length and this amount of time.
Yes. I've done lots of weekend trips with scouts and friends and stuff, and week-long or maybe 2-week-long things. But a month away, that was my biggest event. I lived in Sweden as an exchange student back in the 70s. So I speak the language. 10 million of us speak the language. Doesn't help a lot, but we do. And I was just learning just by kind of some osmosis. I heard, there's this trail called the King's Trail. Okay, I didn't know anything about it, but gradually just learned more and more and got a little curious. Parallel to that, I see this picture of this beautiful mountain with a sheer side, like exactly sheer, and it's not exactly like this, like this. It's this steep, just beautiful. Comes to a point, and then the picture from up there is over the Rapid Delta. The Rapid River comes in. The delta is there, and it's said to be the most beautiful view in all of Sweden. Well, isn't that nice? Okay, now I have two things I'm kind of aware of. Eventually, as I learn more and read more, and I bought a couple books about Kungsleden and read them, and turns out Skarfa, this mountain, is on Kungsleden. It's about 3 miles west of it, and it's the detour. Everybody goes there. And as soon as I connected Skarfa with the King's Trail, it's like, okay, I'm going. That's it. And so that was several years ago and several years before, because I had to retire. And then, of course, COVID got in the way. That wasn't much fun.
Hey, everyone, it's Scott here. Did you know that the members of my real estate team, W Realty Group, are listening to their own voices that call to adventure by setting big goals? Some of those goals include planning trips to Bali and the Kingdom of Bhutan, buying investment homes, and running the Chicago Marathon. At W Realty Group, we support and encourage these big goals and want to help turn them into reality. We're currently looking to add new members to the team. If you know a great real estate agent in the Charlotte, North Carolina area that would benefit from being part of our team, please send a text, an email, or give me a call. And know that when you support W Realty Group, you're also supporting this podcast. Thanks for listening. Yeah. So here's what I love about this. And we talk about like sort of the thread of adventure, but really this started with you living in Sweden as an exchange student as a kid.
1975. Yeah.
How long did it take in your lifetime to make that connection between Skarfa? Am I saying that right?
Yeah. So as close as I can do it.
Good. Skarfa and Kungsleden. Like, when did that association come together for you?
Oh, that was probably, I did in 21, maybe in 2017 or 18 is when I connected those two things.
Yeah. I mean, so like a lifetime, like it took almost a lifetime for these two things to sort of come together and inspire. Like, it's just such a cool thread. that, these inspirational moments from your childhood sort of came together and encouraged you and inspired you to go take this trip?
Oh, for sure. I did backpacking as a scout when I was a kid. And then, I graduated from high school and college and did car camping, but backpacking didn't become part of my life until about 2010, when my son got into scouting.
Yeah. Could you talk about that for a minute? Like this sort of connection between Skirfa and Kungsleden and like just connecting that because the picture of Skirfa was when you were a kid, right?
No, I knew nothing about the northern part of Sweden when I lived there. There's the vast majority of the people live from Stockholm south, and like in the bottom 25%.
Yeah.
It's very unpopulated up further north. And yeah, there's some mountains up there. That's all I knew as a kid.
Your awareness of King's Trail came first.
Yes, and that was within the last couple decades.
Gotcha.
But my interest in Sweden has been every 2-3 years, I keep going back. So that's been growing and expanding, and it kind of forced the situation. Eventually, I would know more about the upper part of Sweden just because I keep going so often.
Yeah. It's so cool. Like the build from being an exchange student to now you're back from this trip, but this is a place that you've been visiting for years. Like, do you remember sort of that time period when you made up your mind to do this trip?
I can remember I was in my office upstairs, and it's like, oh, this is that. And look, here it is on the map. It's right there. Like, boom. It was like a light bulb went on, but it wasn't a new idea. It was like maybe a green button was pushed, that this is a go. We're doing this.
Yeah. And it was a solo trip. You went by yourself.
Most of it, my Swedish nephew went for the first week with me.
Yep.
Then he's not retired, so he had to go back to work. So yeah, the plan was to go solo, and he wanted to go with me for the first week. So that actually worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
Climbing up out of Hemavan in the southern terminus, it was in the rain, and we were above tree level right away. And I got to tell you, I was intimidated. This is not hiking in Ohio or on the Appalachian Trail. This was up, very exposed to the elements, and it was raining and it was blowing. I couldn't see anything, and it was intimidating. So it's good to have somebody there to hold my hand. Though I didn't tell him I was intimidated or scared. I wouldn't admit that, but it was really nice to have somebody else there just so we can kind of bounce the environment off of each other.
Yeah. Can you talk about that intimidation a little bit, or, or even any other sort of like struggles that you experienced on the trail?
I was surprised. I had to tell myself I am qualified. Actually, in my head, I said, I am qualified. And I'd done lots of practice hikes. I'd shaken out my gear. I knew I could do this, but that doesn't mean that I felt that I could do it. And I had to tell myself quite often that I can do this. And it was mostly to do with the elements, either water or the weather.
Yeah.
The actual trail itself was pretty easy. I had one day, I made a mistake. I make lots of them. Made a mistake, and I met some really nice people, the people I refer to as my tramley. They're younger and they can go faster. And the weather turned bad, and I was behind them. And I said, no, I'll just keep pushing. I'll keep pushing. And it was raining, and I passed the spot. And a guy named Pontus I knew. I was taking a break there, and I said, I'm really exhausted here. And he said, well, perfect, right here. So set up a spot right here. There's a big rock to sit on. It was flat. It was truly the most perfect spot you could want. No, my friends were still hiking away from me. So I put my pack on, and about 5 miles later was the next place I could set up my tent. Everything was underwater.
Mm.
And when I was pushed already to my physical limits, I added another 5 miles slogging through a wet trail.
Oof.
And I kicked myself for a long time. That was a really, really bad mistake. In fact, I posted something. I have a Garmin, and I just put a message out there that I'm not a happy camper. And a friend of mine, Bill, he sent me, I don't know what he was doing up, but he saw it on the Garmin thing and said, sometimes the mountains we conquer ourselves, from Sir Edmund Hillary. And I was like, yeah. And that was really, for me, it set home right. I was like, okay, I'm the one that can get through this. I'm the one that can do this. And I laid in my tent until noon the next day. I never do that. I'm always early riser. And I had 2 meals in my tent. I never do that. You never eat in your tent. But I ate 2 meals in my tent, in my sleeping bag. Got a lot of rest. Next day, it stopped raining. I was off and going. And by noon, I was like, yeah, okay, I don't need to quit. But I was ready to quit. If there was an Uber available, I would have headed.
I love that. Well, it brings me to my next question, like just about like any growth or transformation that you feel like you experienced personally in that 30 days on that trail.
One of the things I noticed, it wasn't necessarily a big deal, but for me it was. I absolutely like to hike alone. I want to hike alone. I want to stop and look at this tree if I want to. I want to stand and turn in a circle because the view behind you is often better than the one in front of you. I want to be alone. At night, I want to sit up with a group of people and sit around a real or a fake campfire and just talk about the day and enjoy each other's company. For me, it used to be kind of a blending. And after that trip, it's like, no, this is how I like to do that.
That's so interesting. Actually, I really like that. So by day, your preference is to be alone.
And I don't mind other people, but
Yeah. But I wonder, like, why is that? Like, what are you thinking about during the day? What's going on during the day?
I know you're not supposed to, but I listen to music and podcasts and I'm in my head and I don't let myself think about anything negative. It's a happy spot. I don't care what it takes. I'm going to be happy, damn it. And that's what I do. And if somebody else is there, then I got to talk loud enough so they can hear me. And maybe I don't hear them. And one of us stops and all of a sudden now we're talking to each other, but we're 25 yards apart and we can't hear each other. And I'm the slow one. So I have to walk faster to catch up to the other people. Now I'm going faster and I feel comfortable. I like hiking alone. So for all my friends watching this, you can hike with me. I don't care.
But I think it's so interesting because then when the nighttime comes, like something comes out of you that wants to share and be in community and be with people. Like what changes?
Like you said, it's like I'm still here. When I'm hiking alone, I'm still hiking with the other people, but we're just not together at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then we get there and how did you like that boat crossing? Or what about that hill? Or, hey, I found your spoon. I just like sitting around listening and sharing stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's something cool about that, and it almost sort of comes back to the idea of the campfire. Like to me, like what you're talking about is like during the day, it's about experiencing life for yourself. Like, really having the experience, and then at night, you get around the campfire and you get to share that experience with others.
Yep.
And then you get to
Yep.
wake up the next day and do it again. Like I just think there's something very cool about that.
And then on top of that, I realized I fell 5 times. Each time I fell was on a wet rock as I was hurrying to catch up. And the thing I've got in my head now, and you meet some nice people and they're going to be nice people forever, but you really hate to lose them. But there's nice people behind you too. And that was a thing. And I'd met some of them because as you leapfrog people and you all end up at the same boat crossing. So I knew some of them, but I wanted to keep up. And I really should have said, hike your own hike your safe speed. They'll catch up. They're nice people too. And that's a change of mindset for me. I need to actively think about that to make it happen.
I kind of like that. It's got a little ring to it. There's nice people behind you too.
Yeah.
That's cool. So John's dad, you have written a book about this whole experience. And I just want to touch on that real quick. Please feel free to share like how people can get a copy and what they're going to find in that book.
It's on Amazon. If you look for John's Dad Hikes, it's 3 words and John is Jons. If you look on Amazon, boom, it's the first thing that comes up. And it's 200 something pages of Kungsleden. I started it just as to do a journal, maybe just for me, a diary. And would I actually make it into a book? I didn't necessarily care, but I wanted to capture all of those moments. And one of the things I do is on the map, I actually write, I crossed here. I had to shuttle an extra rowboat here. I met Annalise here. This is where I met the Latvian people. Whatever happened, we met some Swiss people living on the trail for 6 months just because that saved them money. Okay, put in about them and their 3-year-old kid in diapers. And so that went into the day-to-day journal with some really pretty pictures. But as I was writing it, I realized while I was getting ready, I was super frustrated because there wasn't one source of information. I could find some stuff on this website and some in this book. And one book was really a great book, but it was so detailed that after you cross the bridge, there's 2 rocks. And then to the left of the rocks, there's a patch of cloudberries. Well, which bridge are you crossing? I mean, it was just so detailed, it was useless.
Yeah.
And so I did realize that people needed something. And so I started out with the first half of the book is basically start with page 1. And by the time you get to the middle of the book, you're ready to go. What decisions you have to make, questions and answers. That's a style I shared some of the information all about the boats and the rivers and the trail and the different cabins and stations and all the gear you might need, because people are saying, well, will this backpack work, or will this tent work? And so I go through those things. And so that's what it is. It's 2 books in one. This is a how-to Kungsleden, but also here's how I did Kungsleden.
Yeah.
And it's been great. I met a guy from Israel, especially now with everything from October 7th. He and I are messaging back and forth, and the guy from Canada, Carrie, that just got home. Met several people. It's really been fun.
It's really a good book. And I want to encourage like anybody that's thinking about hiking the King's Trail. It's like a must-have book. You do have some like checklists in there where you like, you basically answer these questions and it's like a fill-in style. Like it basically, what I see it as is like, it almost takes away all the excuses. Like you just have to make the decision that you're going to go and then get this book, and it'll basically walk you through everything that you need to go do this hike. So well done there. It's very thorough and I really enjoyed it. So I definitely, at some point in my life, I hope to hike the Kungsleden, and I'll be taking a copy of your book with me for sure.
Don't take it with you. It weighs too much.
Okay. I'll use it to prepare, because you did talk about carrying the weight of books and maps and stuff in your book. I did pick up on that. I want to go back in time a little bit and talk about, because this was a retirement trip for you, but I want to talk about like adventure really, in listening to your story, it's been a thread in your whole life. And I wonder if you could just talk a little bit about where your adventure spirit started.
Well, I don't know that I have an adventure spirit. I think, and maybe as I look at somebody else who does base jumping with a bodysuit, okay, that's an adventurous guy. Me hiking for a month in the mountains, but I guess compared to somebody who hasn't done that, maybe I'm adventurous, I guess. I've always liked to do a little more. Junior high, we had science fair. So while some kids were mixing baking soda and vinegar to make volcano, I spent 6 months and I built an analog computer from a diagram I found in Electronics Illustrated. And the next year I did like an electronic lock thing, same kind of thing. And 8th grade, I actually designed and built a calculator with plexiglass covers and lights inside, colored wires. And I won the super science fair that year, by the way.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I got into model airplanes and from building models, flying model airplanes. So I had to build one that flew faster. And then I had to build one that dropped a little plastic bomb. And then I got into the multi-engines. And then I got my real pilot's license. And so just always, I'm comfortable here. What's the next step?
Yeah.
And I think, with scouts, I started with the backpacking. And when my son got into it, then, we did the weekend and week trips with the scouts, went to New Mexico with the scout camp for a couple of weeks. We're in the mountains for 2 weeks, get resupplied a couple of times. And I was like, well, what's the next step? And a through hike of Appalachian Trail PCT isn't in the cards for me. I like my wife. I don't want to be away from her that long. It's a lot of days she likes me, so I'm assuming she wants me to be around most days. So the true through hike like that, a big long distance one, isn't it for me? But several weeks, I could negotiate that. And I love Sweden. For me, going to Sweden isn't going away; it's going home. When I land in Copenhagen or I land in Stockholm or Oslo, it's like I'm returning after a trip.
Yeah.
And so for me, the fact it was in Sweden was not a big deal.
Yeah. Can you go back and can you talk to us about that? Because you were an exchange student in Sweden as a kid. Like how did that come to be? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. When my high school was big into exchange students, and I made friends with some of them. And there's a Malaysian kid, Chua Chung, and he and I were friends. And he suggested, "Why don't you apply for this?" So I applied for it, and so I finished my junior year. And I came home, and there was a letter in the mail. And 2 weeks after that, I was in Stockholm. I knew I was going to Sweden. I didn't even know how to spell Sweden. I thought there was Sweeden, not just. 2 weeks later, I'm in Stockholm. I didn't speak Swedish. We did a 3-week language camp to kind of give us some grammar and some vocabulary to get us going. I lived 6 months with a family way down south. And then 6 months between Christmas and New Year, I moved to a family up in Gothenburg, the second biggest city, and then lived with them until I came home and went to high school, just like a regular kid, except for the fact I didn't speak the language. You couldn't tell me apart from anybody else. learned to love the food, and I get used to eating with my fork upside down and shaking hands with everybody every time you came or went. That's one of their cultural customs, and I was totally not used to that.
Yeah.
Taking your shoes off inside.
That's awesome. So how did that experience in Sweden as a kid kind of create a foundation for you? And because you've traveled quite a bit in your career and in your working life and, as a dad.
When I got home from that trip, we landed, I don't remember which airport, we landed in New York City, one of those airports. I thought that was the last time I would travel outside the United States. Maybe go to Canada, maybe, go into Tijuana in Mexico, but truly going to another country a long ways away. I figured out that all you need is a passport and a mostly paid off credit card, and you can take a trip. And so after I was out of college and I was actually working and saved up some money, as soon as I got my credit card paid off, I made another trip. And I've been to more than 30 countries, all the way from Australia up to Northern Europe. One day I was at work, and my friend sitting across from me says, "Hey, do you want to go to my brother's wedding with me?" And so I asked her, and she says, "Yeah, it's in Hong Kong."
Nice.
So got to go to Hong Kong and mainland China. And we got home from that. What a Chinese wedding. It was like, who would ever expected, everything is red. I was expecting, white, and like they're wearing red, and nope, that's the right color. And the bedspread is red. Everything is celebrating as red. We're back probably about 2 weeks. And she looks at me and says, "Want to go to Russia?" So 6 months later, we're standing in Red Square.
That's amazing.
Oh, it was great.
I'm curious, like if you hadn't had the experience in Sweden, do you think you would have had the confidence to do some of this additional traveling?
If I hadn't gone as an exchange student,
Yeah.
it's very likely I'd still be living in my hometown in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
And that's where I would have lived. It opened up the doors, but I think it also gave me a little kick to push me through it. And I found out it's like, oh yeah, I can be on a ferry between Denmark and Germany, where nobody speaks English except for me, and I'm totally confused on what I'm supposed to do. And I can see Germany approaching very quickly through the doors.
Yeah.
Scared to death, but then it worked out.
Yeah.
And so going through that kind of a thing, it's like, yeah, I can survive that.
Do you remember any moments like as an exchange student, as a kid, that were like sort of like light bulb moments for you? Like just these kind of opening like moments that have stuck with you and contributed to your desire to want to do bigger and bigger adventures?
The one that immediately pops up, and it's important to me, but in the big scheme of things, I don't know. I was going with some friends between Sweden over to Denmark on a ferry. Just go over for the day and you spend the day on the ferry and come back. It's no big deal. You have a hamburger over in Denmark. On the way over, they started, "Do you want your cigarette?" Because everybody smoked. And this is like the 100th time. And I thought, I'm the only one not smoking. I'm 18, 17, almost 18. I knew better, but I thought, nope, I'll take one this time. And I won't inhale deeply. I won't make a fool of myself. And as I reached out to take that stupid cigarette, they said, "Oh, you don't smoke," and moved on. And nobody cared. I was really surprised. And I'm sure that if I had taken that cigarette, I would be a smoker today, assuming I didn't die of lung cancer already. That was I don't have to smoke. They're not putting peer pressure on me.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
There was an acceptance there. It almost feels like you kind of like had a realization of giving yourself permission to be you.
Yeah. This is who I am, and I don't smoke, and but I do like, taking the boat over to Denmark and have a beer or two. So it's okay.
I love it. So I do want to pivot because I want to talk about your trail name. Your book is John's Dad Hikes Kungsleden, and throughout your whole backpacking life, you've become John's dad. Where did you get that? Talk about this name that you've taken on the trail.
In our scout troop, there's a father and a dad. And there's mothers too, and that's an evolution that's happened. But when we were in, for the most part, it was fathers and dads. So there was Joe's dad and Ethan's dad and Evan's dad and Gabriel's dad and John's dad. And I thought the kids would go around, they didn't know our real names, and they didn't know our last names half the time. So they said, "Hey, John's dad, would you do this? Hey, John's dad, can you sign this for me?" And I said, you know what, that's who I am. Since 1997, when I knew he was going to come along, he was born in 98. Every decision I've made, every action I've taken has had him as part of it. Sometimes I still had to do the work trip, but I thought about when am I coming home? When do I need to pick him up from daycare? And if I missed a couple Christmas pageants and decided never again. So it didn't matter how much money I lost. I did not go to LA 2 weeks before Christmas. That's the way it is. And so everything in my life centered around making sure he had a good life. He grew up. He knew I loved him. I respected him, wanted him around. So, well, it just, a little tangent. About 45 minutes ago, I'm the first one he tells about this big bit of good news at work. Where in front of a client, he was designated as the lead person. He's only been working maybe 4 years, but the client sees him and his company sees him as a lead person on this project. And it's just like, he was so proud he had to tell his dad. That's what I was looking for. That's what I wanted for him.
Yeah. Well, you've had a unique philosophy with him that I wonder if you could share with listeners, just kind of about like embracing every single moment and every single year with your son. I wonder if you could talk about that.
Yeah. And that became a big deal for me. It isn't just a mantra that I say, oh, I had this mantra. I actually, when I had to make a decision, I would say, John's going to be 6 months once. He's going to be 1.5 once. He's going to be 8 once, going to be 12 once. Last summer, we went backpacking in Alaska. In my mind, he's going to be 25 only once. And at some point, we can't do this anymore. And that's the way it's going to be. I won't be able to. He'll have his family. And so all of my decisions were based on, I have this opportunity now, and that's it.
I mean, it seems like incredibly wise. Like so many of us have so many things going on in our lives and we get busy and, things happen. Like, how did you develop this wisdom to be so present with your son?
Without dragging up all dirty laundry, I'm not sure that I actually grew up in a really proper family. There was a lot of physical abuse, for sure, a lot of emotional and mental abuse. And I couldn't have that for him. And I made that decision is that, he's going to know I love him. I'm going to love him. And he's going to know it. And he's going to be very comfortable. And in fact, he was so comfortable. Last summer, we were doing a water crossing in Alaska, and I screwed up. And he chewed me out. And I deserved it. I mean, I totally deserved it. But he doesn't even know this. I was so glad. He was totally comfortable to chew me out because he knew that's where it ended. It was not going to be fatal to the relationship. It wasn't going to blow back on him in some horrible way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so great. He laughs at my dad jokes too. That's the best part.
How does it feel for you to know that you sort of reverse that cycle, that like he knows that you're there for him? I mean, what is that like for you?
Well, it's still kind of scary. Did I do it right? I had really no role model. When he turned 12 years old, I didn't have an example of how to raise a 12-year-old boy. Mm-hmm. I was totally from scratch. Luckily, his mom and I decided to not get married, but she lives this way, about 5 miles.
Okay.
We live real close to each other. We share back and forth, and she and I partnered really, really well. John comes first in everything. Now, he doesn't always get what he wants. That's not how he comes first, but he comes first. And I know I bit my tongue a lot of times, and I'm pretty sure she did too, that John comes first. The important thing is that for she and I to get along, raising him. And we did. We share birthday parties and Christmas, sit together at the Christmas parties and the plays and teacher conferences and ride together when we go see him at college. It's 99 percentile for how great it's going. It's perfect. And because we both put John first, and I sure hope it turns out okay, that he doesn't spend lots of time with his therapist talking about stuff. So,
well, I think being in the wild and backpacking, it's always the best therapy. And you guys have spent quite a bit of time together backpacking in the woods.
Oh yeah, lots through Scouts, and we did Alaska last year. In fact, it was kind of funny. I realized that when we saw some grizzlies, and they were half a mile away, we were not threatened in the least bit. I moved in front of him so that the grizzly couldn't get him.
Protective dad.
Like, okay, they're too far away. I got time to do this. So, okay, I don't have to stand in front of him right now. But that's putting everything on the line.
So you have created this, this love for your son, like you've created this identity for yourself. Like your trail name is John's dad. You've become known as John's dad. What's his trail name?
3 years ago, a group of us went over and did the Virginia Triple Crown, the McAfee Knob, Tinker Cliffs, and Dragon's Tooth. And it's a day's drive from here. So it's a nice long weekend trip. And John went along with us, and not everybody that was there knew him. So one of my friends who's known me as John's dad for 10 years, it says, and this is John's dad's son. The whole group, even a side conversation next to us, stopped. It just sounded too weird on the ears. It was just too weird.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, and boom, that's how his trail name came about. That was it. John's dad's son.
So John's dad and John's dad's son. I mean, it's such a great story. I love that
Yeah.
so much. It's so much fun. So how has your relationship with him evolved sort of over time through adventure?
Well, it's been great. You know, like he sent me that good news just, less than an hour ago. But he'll call me up with personal questions or professional questions on how should I handle this? And I see him once a month at least. And he lives 2 hours away, but I'll drive 2 hours down, have dinner with him for an hour, hour and a half, and drive back. That's works for me. He's a regular person. He's all grown up. When he was little, I would ask him for his advice and then walk him through the thought process to try to give me advice, because I knew what the answer was. I didn't need his advice. Now I call him up when I want advice. He's just a regular person. It's just great having him in my life. I don't know what I would do. It would be pretty, well, we had a big fight once. He and I did. It's a real fight, not a physical at all.
Yeah.
He wanted to buy a motorcycle. And I said, no. And he's 20 years old or so, 1920. So I can't tell him no. I said, you're not going on my insurance and you're not storing it here. And I ended up crying. I said, I'm not going to bury my son. And so he understood it. And his mom made him call me 2 weeks later when he totaled the motorcycle to tell me that he was okay. And it was only totaled because of the certain piece that broke as it rolled over. It wasn't like you might picture on a highway, 2 head-on crashes. It was just the bike basically rolled over a little bit and broke an expensive part. But he always drives safely. He's got the guards I never had when I was a kid. Because I know when I had my motorcycle, almost every time somebody tried to kill me, and quite often it was me doing stupid stuff. And he's got a better head on his shoulder. He took the training classes. But he saw me cry that day. He was like, I'm not going to bury you.
Yeah. Well, and I appreciate you sharing that. I think to kind of bring all of this together, though, as we look at the threads from the exchange program and all of your traveling to your relationship with your son, and you have created this identity for yourself. You have a YouTube channel where you do a lot of sharing about backpacking and the King's Trail, and you have created this identity for yourself around being John's dad. But yet in your retirement, you did go do this 30-day trip for yourself solo for you. And I do kind of want to finish with that, because not many people in their early 60s are going to go off on a 30-day adventure solo by themselves in another country, in the middle of the backcountry. What was that like for you? Just that kind of, at that age, going off and doing an adventure like that for yourself.
I was very concerned that I had to tell myself I am qualified. I had to tell myself that I had the right gear. I knew how to use it. But I'm also wandering off into a place where they constantly say the weather changes drastically and be prepared. And I spent more time planning exit routes than actually planning the trip. If this happens, I'll need to turn around. And I didn't actually lay it out in a spreadsheet. I do spreadsheets, and I could do something like this, but I didn't. But I knew that if I got to this point, that my exit was to go ahead, or my exit was to go back. And because there'd be 3 days. If I had to get off, I'd have to hike for 3 days to get to civilization. I bought myself a Garmin that I hang on my backpack with, I call it a helicopter button. You push and hold the thing for 10 seconds and they send a helicopter.
Yeah.
And it costs a ton of money. Those things are expensive. And I decided I had to have that. At my age, easily the next step could end me. I could be on the ground, unable to move. And I had to be able to self-rescue. I was aware of it. We got to a place called Singi, which is going north. At Singi, you turn right to go to Kebnekaise, the big mountain. And a lot of people do that. That's a real common route. I got there and I thought, well, I'm not supposed to be here. And we just walked past it. it wasn't even a milestone. Yeah, I just walked past it and I'm thinking, I was never supposed to see this building. I was not going to make it this far. And then 4 days later, and I'm in Obisco. It's like, I'm not supposed to be here. I wasn't going to be dead. That's not what I was thinking. But I thought that I would have to be extracted from the trail because of physical injury. Yeah. Most likely, I have a artificial knee, and I got the knee 1 day to the year exactly before I started my thru hike at the King's Trail.
That's amazing.
And I was very certain that I would not make it. And one step in front of the other, like people say, and that's what it was. And all of a sudden, I'm eating ice cream in Obisco.
It's amazing. It's a huge accomplishment, a huge congratulations. It sounds really fun, something I would love to do. And I think it's very inspiring. As we kind of wrap up here, and I'll leave this up to you, whether it's speaking to being active in retirement or being a dad as it relates to adventure. Is there any advice you want to leave listeners with?
Well, just a few weeks ago, I was at a baseball game with a friend, and he was telling me that his kids had stopped responding. They live with their mother. And I told him straight out, you need to, every time, at every birthday, every holiday, you send the Christmas card, you send the birthday card, you call them on special days, no matter if they're responding or not. Because someday they're going to say, all right, I'm ready to have this relationship. And if he's walked away, he won't be there. He's got to be there no matter how much he feels abused. He's got to stay. And that's for parenting 101 for me. And for retirement, you got to retire to something. My grandfather retired. He was a farmer, hardworking farmer, bought himself a nice recliner, a color TV at the time. That was a big deal, and a clicker. He lived for another 25 years, but had no idea who he was. And I described what he did. He drove out to the mailbox once in a while. It was like 30 yards away. And you got to retire to something. I went to REI, taught classes, sold backpacks and shoes to people, and increased my time with scouts and with volunteering with exchange students. This is that you got to retire to something. Don't just stop working. That's no good.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Bob, John's dad. You've got an epic story. I mean, from going to Sweden and doing this exchange program, a lifetime full of travel, being an amazing dad, and then this 30-day trip on Kungsleden. Like at some point, Hollywood's going to pick up on your story and they're going to want to make a movie about you. And I want to know when they do, who's going to be the Hollywood actor that's going to play you in your movie?
Well, it'll be a foreign film.
Oh, okay.
And designed with flashbacks. So some old guy thinking back to his youth. So if we're going to get my wife to watch it, Tom Selleck or Harrison Ford have to star as me.
Oh, nice. All right. We're going big.
I'm thinking as the old guy, Bill Murray. I may not look like him, but people say I look like Bill Murray.
Nice.
And so I'm thinking Bill Murray is the old guy, and then Bill Skarsgård as the young kid. And he's Bill Skarsgård is a world famous Swedish actor.
Okay.
A lot of Swedish movies, and his whole family is in Swedish movies.
Yeah.
And so it's going to be a flashback thing. I can kind of picture that. It's kind of.
I'm excited. I'm excited about this movie. What's it going to be called? What's the movie called?
Well, I think the title comes from something my Swedish host brother called me once. Hedersvensk.
Hedersvensk.
It's going to be a foreign film, so it'd be translated to honorary Swede.
Okay.
And because my life took such a big jaunt, a big change in direction, and blue and gold are my favorite colors. So
Hedersvensk, the honorary Swede, and I got just if I get a vote, I'm going Bill Murray. I think that would be awesome. It feels good. Although the other two, man, I mean, you can't lose with any of them. That sounds amazing. Well, John's dad, thank you so much for being with us today and sharing your story. I really appreciate it. And for those listening, I hope you've been inspired today as much as I have. I hope Bob's story has encouraged you to listen to the voice inside that calls you to adventure, because we want to hear your story next. If you have a story to tell or just need a nudge to create one, please send me an email. We'd also appreciate it if you'd help us spread the word by leaving a review and sharing or tagging Inspire Campfire in your social media. And until next time, I want to encourage you to get outside. Thanks for listening. John's dad, thank you so much for being here.
I think it was great.